So because we're in this Zoom, indeed, my question as well to participants to the panel. I hope that you're all here. I saw a couple of you. Yeah, I think you're all there. So for this panel today, that the first panel of the session that is about the challenges that we experience in the current situation. We have 4 panel members, and I'm going to introduce them in according to the distance from me here in Northern Europe. So starting with Pernille Christensen from Sydney. You can just say hello, yeah. And then we have Muhammad Najib Razali from Malaysia.
Yep.
We have Francois Viruly from Cape Town, and Jorn van Wetering from Reading. Yeah, so everyone is here. And I would like to start this panel by giving the panel members the opportunity to introduce themselves by telling us about what were your biggest challenges for this last year going online, and did you also experience any windfalls? So what were your biggest opportunities that you picked up during this time? So again, starting with Pernille.
Yes, so my name is Pernille Christensen. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Technology, Sydney. I had 1 week to transition all 4 of my subjects, and we often teach in block mode here in Sydney. So what that means is half of the entire semester subject is taught over a weekend. And due to what we had a pause week, I ended up coincidentally doing three of those subjects transitioning in 1 week, which was 54 hours of content. So I would say that was my biggest challenge, was the speed by which I had to mobilize to transition. The windfall was the fact that I did manage to have 1 week with the students in advance, and we were able to use that week to have a conversation about their learning needs, how they saw online learning, and enabling them to participate in a co-design of the online structure, I guess, which I think has actually resulted in some really positive outtakes that we're going to continue based on the student feedback at the end of the semester.
Okay, thank you, Pernille. That's really interesting. So you managed to include the students in your
I did. I got really lucky.
Yeah. Let's move to Muhammad. For Muhammad, what were your biggest challenges and biggest opportunities, biggest windfall?
Hello, good day. My name is Muhammad Najib from Malaysia. I'm a senior lecturer at the Universiti Teknologi Malaysia. So the current challenges by doing 100% online teaching is our university, 70% of our students are from a low income group. So it's a big challenge for us in order to ensure the online learning will not disturb, to ensure the high quality of our teaching. Therefore, the top management, the university's management, they initiate what we call as a crowdfunding to give our students financial assistance in order for them to top up their internet, to upgrade their internet package in order for them to ensure they will not left behind, because most of our students are from this group, because in Malaysia public universities is highly subsidized. So therefore it will by using the 100% online, using internet, it will affect in terms of the quality of teaching. Therefore, government, the federal government, state government, the local authority, the university itself, we all join together to establish the crowdfunding, whereas our university managed to collect quite high amount of Malaysian ringgit, amount of money to help our students, especially from lower income group. So the big challenge is to ensure that this group are not left behind. Thank you.
Yeah. And did you experience any nice things about the transition as well?
The nice thing is the COVID pandemic 19 actually will push the what you call it online learning medium initiative, because we have this years before, but it's just on just the policy. We encourage lecturer to establish their online content. We try to follow the high rank universities such as Harvard. They have online content, but it's still just meeting, seminar, discussion. But this COVID-19 actually accelerate and push us to be more creative, to establish our own online content, our own YouTube channel, our own fan page, something like that. So for students able to access, besides synchronous, they are also always have an option to asynchronous platform. So if they are unable to join the online teaching live, they can always refer back. I mean, they can always click later when their internet is okay, because internet is not always smooth here, at least in my country. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed. Let's move on to South Africa. Francois.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm going to air the same point that was just made. When COVID started, and you must remember our academic year starts in February at the University of Cape Town. So we were like a few weeks in and everything halted. So we had the whole academic year in front of us, having to deal with. But the moment we went online, we shut the door on about 30% of our students. In other words, who could not interact with us in an effective way. So we almost closed the lecture door on 30% of us. So now, of course, that was unacceptable, and we wouldn't be able to have done that. So what then happened, the internet service providers gave students 20 gigs a month. Now you can imagine one Zoom of 40 minutes, that's 1 gig gone. So 20 lectures later over a month, and you are, but that wasn't even the biggest problem. Many of our students didn't even have laptops. So as a university, we found ourselves buying laptops for our students, all under the financial arrangements. What we have done more recently is all the students who were in RESs, in our residential things, were told to go home, and all the vulnerable students without internet were asked to come back. So at least they're on campus to some degree with a Wi-Fi. So they're sitting in their university rooms undertaking online education. But it was the best way, actually. And we had to do that in a responsible way. That's only just starting now because of distance, and we didn't want to put them in a vulnerable position. So I think those were the challenges. Now, to come back to your point of positives, is that many of the, by the way, what was interesting for the weaker students, we had a courier service running. We printed the online material. The material for students was printed and with a courier sent to their home. So they received the online version in a paper type of copy, the documents and everything else. The positive is that for the weaker students, two things started happening. Certain students who would not put up their hands in a class will send you a message, will interact with you. And so what we did find is that some of our, how shall we call it, quieter students were suddenly part of the education process. So I think that was the positive side. And the other thing is, with the lectures being recorded, some of our weaker students could re-listen to the same lecture 4 or 5 times, which we wouldn't normally have had. But we very rapidly put an end to synchronous teaching. Why? Again, for the same reason that was just made, it just didn't allow it. So yes, are there positives in here? And I think the biggest one is for students to be able to re-look at lectures and undertake. some of them will say it worked well because they ended up with higher marks, but I don't think that was our intention necessarily in what we were trying to achieve. Okay.
Oh, thank you. That's really interesting to hear. Last, Jorn, how about you? Biggest challenges, and did you see any windfalls as well?
Well, I think I like coming back to where we were in March and my thinking at the beginning of March compared to now. And I hadn't ever been on Teams before or on Zoom. I think I was quite naive, like a lot of people going into lockdown, thinking this will all be over by May. We're even planning field trips at that point. Unlike Francois, we were sort of at the end of the year, and I had one lecture left to cover when we went into lockdown and the university closed, etc. So I sort of almost made it to the end before the wheels came off. What happened next is basically I was meant to do a whole week of presentation assessments in classrooms. Those had to go online. Most deadlines got moved in our institution. And I think so in terms of challenge, the challenge now in front of me is I have to finish the end of term. And I'm going to be in the situation for at least a little while, possibly longer. So how can I effectively end this term? And I think, so the windfall for me was that I had a bit of time to sort of get my head around things because most of my assessment deadlines got moved. And I sort of went from having an audio recording device in my last lecture where I had 15 students out of 100 students left, to sort of recording things in a small room in my house with an audio recording device, to slowly sort of building up my confidence to try new things. And I think that's been the real windfall that, well, the university, in our case, first of all, offered a lot of training to help me get to grips with online recordings. And I hadn't really operated in a virtual world, I'm going to be honest with you, before March. And yeah, reflecting on that, I think that sort of quite critical moment in March was actually a great way of forcing my thinking into a mold. And forming the basis for my teaching that and other things that I now do and activities that I now do, because I started trying things because the term is nearly over. I sort of had the confidence that most of it was in the can, and I had the opportunity to experiment around a bit. And I think the windfall for me was that I sort of had the confidence that I delivered on what I needed to deliver, and I could start sort of laying the groundwork for what I'm now doing. And so over the year, I've been able to build on that knowledge, that sort of really little bit of basic knowledge that I developed in March. And I sort of feel I'm still learning a lot at the moment, but it was quite useful to have that sort of short grace period, if you want, to start getting my head around things. So yeah, I think it's been a very interesting experience, but comparing to, well, because I like to come back, as I said, to that calibration point in March. So sort of when your laptop backs up, it sort of puts in a point of reference to say, okay, you can go back to that point. I don't think it does it anymore with Windows 10, but I like to come back to that point and sort of compare where I was then compared to where I was now, and sort of think about the learning curve that I've gone through. So it's been very positive in lots of ways, although yeah, there were lots of challenges on the way, but I'm sure we can cover a few more of them as we go through this session.
Yeah, well, thank you all. Yeah, I think there was a kind of a next step that I wanted to go to with you. And by the way, for everyone listening in, please, if you add questions in the text, we'll get back to them in a few minutes. So maybe first to tackle the technical issues that were mentioned about both by Francois and by Mohammed. So we have these challenges of internet access and speed. I guess that's something we all encounter from time to time, although maybe not in the same way as your students. But the technical issues, I think, is something that is even more common throughout all universities. Would you want to mention any specific technical issues that you've met? How you dealt with them?
Let me maybe start. I think what we did come to realize, it was a point that was just made by Jorn as well, and that is, I think we maybe had the technologies, but we weren't going to use them. You know, if I look at the platform that we had at our university to create lessons, to do assessments, and we were all using it basically as an announcement service in the past, you know, with a very limited use of the capability. So I think that what this did to us was to force us into, as they say, we were forced into 2030. We haven't quite got there yet, but it's, and I think that is probably one of the biggest things that we had. So from a technology, I think we had the technology, but we weren't really going to use it until we were forced to do so. But I think my biggest issue, and it's something we can turn to, is, I suppose in one of the previous presentations, the hardware and software were largely there. Like I said, for many students, not. But did we have the pedagogy to link into those two? Because we were running on an old teaching and learning system. And I don't think we had moved our, once you're online, you do things very differently. And I think we were trying to force offline education into an online world without fully understanding the pedagogical implication of doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So probably these are the developments now ongoing that you aiming to change your education to fit online, or?
I don't know if the others would like to comment, but
yeah.
For example, we were all used to the exam at the end of the year, and I think the point which we just made. How do you run an exam in the old way? Or do you go on continuous assessment now? Or do you, as somebody said, you have a portfolio? Or suddenly you find yourself with saying, oh, well, we're going to try to make the exam work, when actually we should be saying, well, maybe it's the end of the exam and the way that we know it.
Yeah.
But anyway, let me give it to others.
Someone want to comment? I see Pernille nodding.
Oh, yeah. I mean, personally, I haven't given an exam in many years. I've always done a final project, but that's partly due to the types of subjects that I teach that are quite inclined towards doing project work as opposed to exam work. But at UTS, we did still have exams, and there was an option for a proctored exam online. An open book exam online. So the students had to log in, access it, get the exam, download it, and then upload something within 24 hours. And then there was sort of a hybrid in between where it was artificial intelligence proctored, where they sort of looked at, I guess, eye movements, and were you looking down, and did you leave the room? Did people come into the room? So they had the cameras on your laptops. So we did still have exams at a university level, but there was a lot of encouragement to move away from exams. And as Francois was talking about, think about other types of assessments for the final submission.
Yeah. I can imagine this being an issue, dealing with privacy issues, for instance, or yeah.
Hilde,
Jorn, yeah.
So I really like that point that Francois just made about sort of online world versus the face-to-face world, if that makes sense. I think so. Before we went into this, obviously the university was our physical interface, and we had a virtual learning environment that supported the physical interface. I think where we've gone is we've flipped from that physical interface, which is the university, where we have our lecture theatres and we have interactivity with students and all these things. And we just sort of transposed, a lot of us just sort of transposed that. I know I did, completely virtually, but losing a lot of the little things that a face-to-face context has to offer you. And one of them is obviously the chemistry that you have with the students in the room. You can read their faces, you know when they're getting tired, you know when they're not getting particular things. and you sort of now have to rely on your intuitive understanding of how a lecture might work based on your sort of historic knowledge of how things went, to generate an understanding of how people might react to what you're saying and how they're processing things, in other words. So that's all lost, I think, if you do everything offline. And so our university has introduced a little bit of interactivity by way of interactive sessions, but it has decided to deliver all lectures asynchronously, so they have to be pre-recorded. So there is no interaction with students in our lectures, but we do have supplementary online interactive sessions, and also face-to-face, just to give our students a real incentive to come into campus. And actually a lot of students have come back for the start of the new academic year in September. So we've gone from physical to virtual, and now we've got a bit of a blend of both. And I think so that's 3 ways of doing the same thing. I think what's really interesting to me is, well, first of all, some things don't work in a virtual world, they work in a physical world. Some things work in a physical world that don't work in that virtual. So there's all these little balances to tease out, and I haven't quite got my head around all of that yet. But again, I'm trying to learn as much as I can in this process. But whatever we do next, I think, is what I'm getting to. It's going to be a 4th option where I think we'll try and keep the best of both worlds, but we sort of have to figure out what that is. And I think, yeah, that's right. Also, maybe welcome some of the insights of other panel members as maybe commenters, because I think that's the bit that we're sort of also moving towards, because there are things where there are ways that technology is limited, and particularly if universities start considering offering exclusively online courses, then there are trade-offs to be made, and that's fine. I think that's just part of the package. But we sort of have to understand where they are. And I haven't got the clearest view on that yet, but I'm doing a bit more teaching next term, so hopefully I might give you a bit of an update again after that. But anyway, if anyone has any insights on that, then they're most welcome.
Good. Mohammed, did you want to comment as well?
In my opinion, believe it or not, this COVID-19 has actually pushed us, especially for those really not familiar with the technology, and maybe due to our age. Okay, me myself in the middle age, sometimes we cannot catch up with the new technology. But this pandemic actually push us or force us to learn a new thing, especially using Zoom, Webex, Teams, and other platforms. So we need to learn. We need to learn a new platform, any platform, because for the sake of our students, to give a good quality online teaching, online learning. So we ourselves, I think we need to learn a new thing. Me myself have to learn how, because I'm quite lucky, because my universities during at the early stage of the pandemic, COVID-19 in early March, my university conducted so many courses, online courses for lecturers, academics, learn how to use Webex, on how to use Teams, how to use Zoom, because when we examine the situation of our student, majority have a low internet speed. So we try to use Webex first, and then because Webex it needs high internet bandwidth, as well as Teams. And Zoom, although it require not really as much as Webex and Teams, but still they use it is still using a video platform which require high internet speeds, high bandwidth. Therefore, our students not afford to have that kind of lucrative internet. Therefore, we try to move to give a lecture another platform, which is Facebook. Okay, Facebook. We actually in Facebook we can switch to low mode, which require only low internet speed and bandwidth. Therefore, as such, several of our lecturers, they form a private group within their subjects, so they can to protect the privacy of the content as well as the session. So they conduct the class via Facebook, and but the lecturer has to buy several tools such as to support our mobile phone, or you can just use a laptop to conduct online class via Facebook. Okay. Another thing that I would like to mention, because some of our subject require data, especially on finance and property finance and economics. So we in our university we have Thomson Reuters data stream lab, which is not we can't use it remotely. Therefore, as a lecturer, because I can enter university, I have to do it by myself to collect the data and provide to students for them to use it. So normally I will ask students to collect the data by themselves, but they don't have choice. They don't have that privilege to have to do some extra work. So we have no choice, because this is we can call it an emergency situation. All right. And I'd like to highlight what Elaine tried to in the question in the chatting room. In terms of grading, we in here in Malaysia, we refer to our board, professional body, board of value, estate agent, and appraisal and property management. We discuss together with them, together with the Ministry of Education, to revise the grading system in order to accommodate the 100% online learning. Okay, this is to ensure that the quality to ensure the quality is still at the same level before the pandemic, at least. Okay. I think that's all for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine, was this answer to the question that you had?
Well, a little bit, but I did want to expand on it if it's okay. And I just wanted to get a sense from the panel, because I literally turned my grades in at 5 p.m. last night, 5 minutes before they were due. And the amount of time it took me to grade, because everything was electronic and I had to keep swapping from folder to folder, and the kids put the stuff in the wrong folders, and it was a mess. So I was just curious, am I the only one that had that issue, and anybody have any ideas on trying to make it so that it's more streamlined? And again, we were, just so you know, we were Zoomed, so we were live classrooms, and then materials were turned in electronically. But I had 22 folders of things for 2 different classes. So anyways, anybody got any good ideas?
22 folders of what?
Well, they had to do, reflect on this, reflect on that, blah, 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 blah.
I was just trying to understand.
Clearly did not know how to do online teaching.
I would say one of the things that I've sort of taken away from this is looking at what is essential as a submission and what is essential for reflective work that doesn't necessarily have to be marked. So I would say I'm probably spending about the same amount of time marking. However, I'm spending a bit more time with one-on-one, or I do some group work. So normally I would meet with them in a tutorial setting or something like that. And that's just not possible or productive to have them in a tutorial setting. So instead I meet with them, each team back to back, which takes longer. But then I give verbal feedback during those sessions, for example, to the teams, as opposed to written feedback. Turnitin also allows you to give verbal feedback instead of written feedback, which I found very helpful, where you can just press the audio, give them the feedback verbally, and the students have responded really positively to that, because then they can listen to it. And I find that I can actually give better feedback in a shorter period of time by doing a short audio clip than I can trying to write detailed comments to make sure that I explain exactly what the reference is that I'm, trying to make the comment for. So I don't know if that would be.
That verbal thing sounds like I got to figure out how to use that, because that would be faster, because the typing and double checking my typing to make sure doesn't have a lot of typos.
Are
There's
you
a
in
lot.
Canvas or Blackboard? What are you guys using?
Well, it's Oaks, which is comparable to Blackboard and Canvas, I guess, but it's called Oaks.
Yeah, I know
I do not
Canvas
like it, but
to do audio feedback.
all right, I'll check it. I'll check out.
Someone
But the
else want
answer
to
to-
comment on this one? No? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
Elaine,
Yeah.
you're our external, and you've seen the systems that we use, so maybe that's another way of going about it. But I do find that marking online takes me more time. We did actually adopt that a few years ago before we went into any of this, but yeah, it's the sort of time you spend staring at screens, which I find a bit more exhausting than just looking at paper-based assignments.
I was going to ask you guys, because you have extensive written comments. Do you have canned comments, or did everybody type all those comments out?
We use Turnitin as one of the features, and you can save annotated comments in there, and then you can just assignments, etc. It really speeds things up, I think. So you have
Yeah, that would, because I get through two projects, it'd be hours. Okay, thank you.
Sometimes I also keep a running Word document, Elaine, so that I have the comments. So that way I can copy paste them between.
Copy paste in. That's a good idea too. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
I've learned something.
Gunther, you had a question a couple of minutes ago.
Well, I had a comment on the previous discussion on software. Well, a couple of points. One of them was, I think we were really lucky in terms of software that the development was that advanced technically at the moment, because all these tools, Zoom, Teams, and you name them, they all use features of HTML5, which have been developed about 5 years ago and put into the browsers. So they are in the browsers, and so they could be used. And that's also the reason why the software could develop that quickly and react that quickly. So the bottleneck to me is not really the software, but as usually it's the way how the software is used and the human side to that. And I think there's a lot what we have to learn. Just to give you some examples, our university, also the IT department in our university, didn't really know what to do. So their first solution was, we have these larger classrooms that have a camera in the back, and they can there you can video the lecturer lecturing, which produces a video that the student may watch for 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute, but then it's so extremely boring to see someone very small standing there in front of the whiteboard or blackboard or whatever it is and lecturing. So that was not a very good choice. Or another thing that I recently watched a video that was done from a webinar of the European Union introducing a certain funding opportunity. And when you watch this, you had to sit through I think it was 3 or 4 minutes of the presenters talking about some administrative things, technical things in the beginning before the whole thing started. So no one took the time to look at that, to edit this out. This needs to be gone. They also had 5 minutes of black screen at the end. So we need to learn how to use these things. I don't think this can be left to individuals and individual lecturers. So we need support for that. But I really and strongly support Jorn's point that we will we will have to develop what was it, the fourth alternative, I think. So to combine both of both worlds. I think what we should forget is getting back to the old non-virtual form of teaching completely. I think this is gone, and this was blown away as an option by the pandemic.
Well, thank you for that, Günther. I think we come back to this the way forward later. But first, there's a topic that has been raised by more of the people following this, and that is the topic of well-being of our students. So Karen Siraki, you also had a question about this.
Yeah. Thanks, Hilde. I mean, you guys have been through the mill and you've been under a lot of pressure. I'm just worried about your mental health. How are you guys coping?
Who wants to start? Pernille?
I'm not sure I'm the right person to ask. I'm a bit of an introvert, and I have to tell you, I love life in COVID land. In the sense that for me, not having to commute an hour into the office on a daily basis is perfectly, delightful, and I can work from my home office. And I'm not somebody who needs to be around people every day, so I'm probably not the right person to ask. I will say that I'm also very cognizant of my extrovert friends and colleagues who have really struggled throughout the year with having to be working from home and on a computer and feeling like they're not having that contact with students. I think one way that I managed to maybe balance that out a bit is I did quite a lot of interactive work with my students throughout the entire year, both in small groups and large groups. And I think, I had an interesting comment on my student feedback survey this semester that more than one student said that they felt like they got to know me better in this class through the way that I taught this class online than they'd gotten to know any of their in-person teachers throughout their course. And I just thought that was very unusual and very unexpected, if I'm being quite honest. But we did a lot of interactive work. I tried to do a lot of group sessions and breakout sessions when we did have time together so that the students got to interact. I started every class with a 20-minute chat session. Basically, that meant students were allowed to log on, and I didn't start talking for 20 minutes. And what was really interesting in the beginning, the students would log on and they would all sit there. But then slowly, one or two of them started chatting, and then others joined in. And by the end of the semester, all of the students were piping in and talking about this, that, and the other. So I think it's been a really challenging year, but I think that there's some things that have come out of this year that have actually been really positive, and in a way, I think have enabled me to get to know the students better than I normally have the opportunity to do when I have a big class of 120 sitting in a big room in front of me where nobody wants to talk in front of everybody else.
Yeah. But did you notice that you because you also say that you spent a lot of time with them? So does this also mean that you spent much more time on teaching than you would otherwise do?
I spent a different kind of time on teaching. I think that's a really good question, and actually goes back to what I think Jorn was saying about what happens after, and maybe I can talk a little bit about that, because UTS is in a quite unique position, being in Sydney and being in Australia, that we have managed the pandemic better than many countries in Australia. And the last 3 weeks of school, I did actually meet with my students once a week, optionally in person. So the last tutorial was in person. We did an optional presentation workshop, and we had final presentations live with a client in the classroom. It did mean that we couldn't all be in the classroom together. So I broke them into 4 groups. So instead of being in the classroom for, I think it would have normally been 7 hours, I was in there for 8 hours and 20 minutes. But, you know, in the big scheme of things, that wasn't that big of a difference.
Mm.
The biggest thing I think would be the tutorials that I did online did take probably closer to the 10 hours because I had to have transition times between each group. And that was a really long day.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Pernille. How about well-being in the UK, Jorn?
Yeah, I think
You're happy in your home office?
well, yes. I think one of the pluses that we've had is that our government has decided. Well, yeah. I mean, we could talk about our government in a separate meeting if you want, but they have decided that to prioritize education, and as a result, the campus has been open since the start of term, has remained open since the start of term, and will reopen again in January. So students are put in a special category, in other words, where their education is seen to be a priority. And therefore, even though we have social distancing measures in place, etc., UK is always big on health and safety, so that you can imagine how everything looks. There's lots of stickers everywhere, as I'm sure as in your institution. But it has meant that as staff, we have been able to go back into the office. And I think, yeah, to further to what Pernille said, some people like being at home. I think they like just the fact that they don't have to commute in every day. And I think, and I certainly also found that it's easier. I found my way of working at home finally after all these years, and I can do it now, and I'm really efficient. But I do like sometimes going into the office, like today. Sometimes you just have a chat with a colleague, socially distanced again. I think for me, so it was a collective experience, and I find the students have a lot of sympathy with us. Okay. So that has really helped because everyone understands we're all in the same boat. I am worried about some students, particularly the ones we're not hearing from. And what I find really difficult is to reach out to them. Okay, and I've got sometimes a little bit the same with colleagues where you sort of sense that maybe something isn't right, but also at the same time, I'm not a qualified counselor, so I don't really know what to do about that. But you do see that it affects differently. I mean, I've tried to harness the opportunities, as I said, and I'm really trying to do my best with that. Maybe that's also just a coping mechanism, but that's the way that I'm coping. But what I do find is that I've really missed is that sense of community. I've seen maybe 3 new students this year out of 300. And that's unprecedented. That I've never had that before. I mean, some of my colleagues have actually taught most of the students face to face in some capacity again, in socially distanced lecture theatres. But I find that community feeling, and particularly the field that we're in, where it's a sociable industry, and our students, real estate students, they need to be set up for a very social world. For them to be operating so offline and so without so little interactivity, I do think that's going to impact on the cohort somehow. What I am finding from personal tutor meetings is, well, for example, it was flagged to me that one student wasn't attending, and I sort of raised this with them in the meeting, and they said, no, I am actually attending, but I live in a house with others, and only one of us logs in. We watch the video all together, and at the end we have a sort of after-match discussion there to discuss what we got out of the lecture and everything. And so I was ready to start telling him off, and in fact he'd adopted really good pedagogic practice, which made me very happy at the end of the day. But I am finding that, yes, students are, because they have nowhere to go, they have no time to do anything. They are engaging with the material, they are watching the videos, they are doing the reading a lot more than they've done in the past. So in a way, a lot of them are ticking all the boxes that we've wanted them to tick in all the other years, and much better this year. But again, as I said, yeah, from both the staff and student perspective, I am worried about the students that we're not hearing from, and that we can't really reach out to, and yeah, so just to maybe skip ahead a little bit, student engagement is also one of the things, if you don't mind, Hilde. I think so. Yeah, I just made a few notes as we were talking. Yeah, we talked about students with disabilities this morning, but also the other thing is students who have had to move back in with their parents, some living with young children, living in small rooms, having no space to study and things like that. I think for those students, it's been very challenging, and we have quite a few of those students to keep engaged and to complete an exam whilst there's a child screaming in the background and things like that. So, I do think particularly now that we don't have that sense of community, it is more difficult to provide those students with the type of support that I think they really need. And I'm still a bit worried about that. And so again, to come back to the things that we haven't cracked, that's one of the things I think we haven't quite cracked yet. And that's where I'd quite like to go back to a bit more interactivity in the future. So anyway, I've rambled on for a bit, but yeah, just a few points there.
Yeah, thank you, Jorn. That's really interesting. Also hearing your thoughts about the students' well-being indeed. Mohammed, do you want to add to this topic as well? How does that work in Malaysia?
Yeah, I think in terms of well-being, it depends on the situation. I think this is I'm saying this on behalf of the academics or lecturers, because what can from my observation among my colleagues, for those who have majority of them are very young family because they have small children, they have a family to taking care of, so they are quite struggle as to especially when they are try to organize when they have a online learning section with the students. Compared to myself, I'm grown up children already, so we are just doing go to our own room and then we just meet during lunch or dinner. So it's quite okay for me in terms of well-being. Although I try to help my colleague if I can help them to deliver the course if they are struggling with especially with the children. This is especially for female, actually for women. They have when they have a small, because during this crisis, all nursery are closed actually, so they can't send the children to the nursery or babysitter. So they have so many things to taking care of. They're quite struggling, but our university actually provide counseling session for those who really needs help. Okay, but of course via online. So they try to, because I think this problem actually to ensure our well-being is still okay, we need to discuss among ourselves. We need to discuss among peers. We need to discuss among seniors. We discuss to for those who has more experience. I mean, experience in terms of doing online learning, especially from education background, because they are. I think they are really familiar with online learning, but at the same time taking care of the well-being. In terms of our students, we have what they call it, academic advisory system, okay, for our students. So each of our academic advisors, they have to follow up their students. They have to follow up their well-being of students, especially on internet connection, as well as their financial. Because how are they able to cope with if they need to buy more internet or upgrade their internet, the quota, the data, something like that. So if that thing happen, we as an academic advisor, we need to report to our university, and the university will give some assistance, not just monetary assistance, as well as counseling section with our students. So I think within this short period of time, at the beginning of the pandemic in March till December, I can say we are quite manageable, okay, quite okay. We are able to manage to ensure there is no. We also have a flexibility if students want to drop the subject, so they can still cope. I mean, they can still the subject still offer in the next semester, because in here in Malaysia, it's unlike in Australia, where they can sign up the subject at any time. We our system quite different, because we have in one semester this is a subject that you need to sign up. You need to enroll. The next, if you miss this subject, then you have to extend. Okay, we are having a like a package system. Okay, I'm graduated from Australia. I quite familiar with their system, but we are different. So we change the system to be more like Australian system, whereas the at least my university, Western Sydney University, where they can enroll the subject at any semester. Okay, we change to that system actually. We give some flexibility. So that's where we try to taking care of our students' well-being, because we are worried, because if they don't have a good internet connection, especially in rural area, bear in mind 70% of our students are from low-income group, and they live in rural or village areas. So it's quite challenging here in Malaysia actually. Although the urbanization in Malaysia is 70%, but internet connection are not that up to that, good standard. Still struggling. I think for developed country, they already established or introduced 5G. We here not yet. Not we can't see the progress yet. Maybe 2022 for 5G, 4G to 5G. Okay. So I think that's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, those are quite some challenges if you cannot log in at all. I know, Francois, you also wanted to comment on the student experience.
I suppose the point I want to make is that we've got to recognize that, and I take the point, that the community, that sense of community, of togetherness, maybe we've lost. But the point that I want to make is that much of learning of students happens between the students themselves. And we see that normally on campus. You know, you're studying with someone else, you've got a problem, you've got another student who maybe understands it a bit better. So, and I think that what we've maybe lost in this sense is that we can teach, yes, we can put it across, but the learning that happens between the students is something that we're going to have to deal with as we go forward. And that's something that we've struggled with. For example, we were halfway through the academic year, and I posed a question to my first year students and said, have you made friends on campus? And most of them said they were still running on their friends from high school. In other words, they had not actually made where you would have expected halfway already into the academic year that they would have met other people. They actually hadn't. So they were relying on, like I said, on the old friends. So I think that is something we're going to deal with. Now, I'm the first one to say that, you know, EQ and we've got to think, but I think we're in that transition world. I think there will be a new EQ that will be built on the online world. How we interact with each other, how we get to know each other. So I think what we're doing at the moment, we are transitioning between the two. Again, at the point I made, we're trying to push a bit of the old world into the new world and saying, you know, we've got to keep the EQ, we've got to keep the interaction, they have to see my face. Maybe as the children will get to school now, having gone online at school, they'll enter the university environment probably more used to interacting online than we've maybe seen in front of us. So I think that we will be moving. We will lose a few things that we will try to push into this new world. But maybe at the end of COVID, we just go back. We just say, well, this was an emergency. We see we're going to do it, but now we're going to do it slowly. And by 2030 or somewhere there, we will get there again. Maybe it's not as permanent as we think. Maybe certain things will be permanent. We'll have picked up some of the positives, and maybe we'll drop some of the others. But I think
thank you for that.
Yeah.
Pernille, you want to add?
Yeah. So I guess I kind of want to respond to that a little bit. I was trying to participate in the chat as well as to answer some of the questions, but Elaine asked me about how I use that chat time, and that goes to your question earlier, Hilde, about time that I'm spending with the students. So I've actually restructured the way that I teach the class altogether. So the lecture material goes online a week prior to the normal lecture time. And it's all done in short modules. So I create a playlist, if you will, on YouTube with what I would normally have as a lecture with, say, you know, anywhere from 5 to 15 different sort of concepts. We have a 3-hour lecture normally at UTS, and I break those down into smaller topics, no longer than 8 minutes, no shorter than 4. And I piece them together into a playlist, and I supplement that with other content that I find on YouTube to include case studies, fly-throughs, those sort of whiteboard drawing types of animation videos, so that sometimes there's content that exists already that is better than anything I can create to explain a concept or to fly through a case study that I normally cover in class. I personally don't see the need to recreate material that exists that is excellent. So what I do is create the YouTube playlist, and I'll have my component of the module talking about the concept, supplement it with a video that exists on YouTube. And in that way, they get a playlist that's equivalent to roughly 2 hours of our time in class, or an hour plus an exercise, depending on the subject and the level of the class. The in-class time then becomes anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, and is exclusively devoted to interactive conversation. So we start with the 20 minutes of chat where the students get to have their own discussion. Then we have a Q&A, and then we do group exercises where the students interact in breakout sessions. And then we come back and they report to the larger group on the exercise that they've done in class. So that's the way to answer your earlier question, Hilde, about how do I do that without having a lot of extra time, is that actually the time that I would have normally devoted to preparing my lecture, I'm just doing the recording at the same time. And then the actual in-class time becomes that interactive. And the feedback from the students is really positive on that. They feel like they're getting a lot out of it. They're enjoying being able to, as some people said, you know, being able to view those lectures multiple times for the students who maybe struggle in a particular subject. And they have that time in class for the Q&A and be able to participate in the discussion. And then they have the breakout sessions where they're able to work with other students to work through a problem and actually apply the learning from class. And I think in that way, we're still able to get the best of the in-class in a virtual world without necessarily losing a whole, the meat of it, I guess. And I think part of it is we have to challenge ourselves, right? To look at all the different technologies available and find what will work for us and our style of teaching, but also for the students' learning. And maybe I had that benefit of the co-design that first week with the students, where I was able to hear from them that, you know, some students said, well, I really need to hear you talking because that's the way I learn to watch. You know, I need to be able to look at the slides and hear you talking. And other students said, well, I really learn much better from notes and being able to read. So my slide deck has the notes in them and they're printed out as a PDF. And then I give the supplemental readings and the supplemental videos, again, as a request from the students. But that combination seems to have addressed the primary learning needs of the students. And I think that's one of the things that as a group, as educators, I think we need to expand the way we think about teaching as well with this new group that, you know, they have an attention span of, you know, 5 minutes sometimes on videos. So talking for an hour you're not going to get them to finish the video if you do it for an hour. You have to break it down into what they can absorb.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. If you don't mind the rest of the panel, I think we'll leave it at this, because this is actually quite a nice bridge, I think, towards the afternoon sessions of today. Well, there are a lot of topics here that have been touched upon, but that we haven't solved, let's say, yet. So I hope we get the chance during the next, during this afternoon and tomorrow to discuss more, and then see how we could use it. I think also, Eamon, we have a lot of input for your next Mentimeter quizzes and discussions?
I think so. It's been very useful. I thought both sessions this morning were very informative, and it's interesting to see how we're all facing very similar challenges, and it's interesting to see how we've differed a bit in terms of approaching and dealing with those challenges. So I think it's been a very useful session. And again, I'm looking at all the chat that's taking place, which is really good because this seminar is becoming interactive in itself. So something we have struggled a bit with in terms of getting our students to engage fully with some of the things that we're doing online. But I'd like to thank everybody for a really good morning session, good start to the seminar. We hope you can join us later in the afternoon. We're kicking off again at 14:30 Central European time. So I'm not even going to try to guess what time zone that might be for some of you. I guess our colleagues down under will be leaving us. They're probably unlikely to stay with us this afternoon, but they're more than welcome if they want to rejoin us tomorrow morning. I know we have a number of colleagues from Australia and indeed from Asia tomorrow morning participating. So again, I think it's really good. And this is a positive opportunity. Our education seminars, this is the 16th education seminar. And certainly this session this morning has been by far the most global. And it's really good to get this global perspective on a common challenge. And it is very much a common challenge, which we've all been thrown into, whether we wanted to or not, and tried to make the best of. So thank you all. I'm going to hand over to Paloma. Paloma, do you want to say anything?
Oh, we can't hear you, Paloma.
We can't hear you, Paloma. We still can't hear you, Paloma.
Same problem just now.
Okay. I'm going to hand over to Gunter because we've had a few problems getting people in, but I've sent everybody the Zoom link as well that Gunter sent me. So that's got more people into the system this morning. But again, we're using the same Zoom link just to confirm with Gunter for the whole day. So the same Zoom link will work for the whole day for you to come back in again.
Yes, and I'll put a link onto this page for tomorrow so that you'll just have one click to get into Zoom.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Paloma's going to join us? No. Yes, we can hear you now, Paloma.
We hear you.
No. Okay.